Hello, my name is Fred Kemp. I'm President and CEO of the Atlantic Council. Welcome to the Atlantic Council front page. This is our new Live Ideas platform, spotlighting the most impressive, the most innovative, and very often the most courageous global leaders. If you joined us last week, you heard from the President of Colombia, Ivan Duque. Next Monday morning, you'll hear from the Managing Director of the IMF, Kristalina Georgieva. But today we will be hearing from a man who has challenges that even those two can't dream of at this moment in time, which is Interim President of Venezuela, Juan Guaidó. Already facing the hemisphere's worst humanitarian catastrophes, man-made humanitarian catastrophes, Venezuela now has to deal as well with a global pandemic coming at its door. Mr. Interim President, thank you so much for your work at this crucial moment. I think we all are eager to hear from you and how your country is confronting this moment. Before we begin, please be aware that this conversation will be conducted in Spanish. In fact, mine will be the last English words you will hear in this program. But you can get English translation if you're on the Zoom platform. You've already been seeing us putting up the instructions. They're also going to be in the chat box about how you can download Transparify, or there will be a link there where you can watch in English or Spanish on the Atlantic Council's website, atlanticcouncil.org. You can't actually, it's not a hot link. It doesn't work on Zoom that way because of security reasons. So you actually are going to have to paste it, drag it, and then click on it if you need the English. As I said, if you're on Zoom, you're going to be hearing the Spanish unless you've already downloaded the translator app. We are really looking forward to hearing you, Mr. Interim President. With that, it's my honor to turn over to Adrian Arsht, Executive Vice Chair of the Atlantic Council's Board of Directors and founder of the Adrian Arsht Latin America Center and the Adrian Arsht Rockefeller Foundation Resilience Center. Adrian, over to you.
Now it's your last word is in English. Mr. Interim President, it is truly an honor to have you with us today. Thank you for your time and for participating in this conversation.
Gracias, Fred y Adrian. Soy Jason Marzak.
Thank you, Fred and Adrian. I am Jason Marzak. Welcome, President Interim. Today's discussion is part of our new series, Ideas from the Americas. Welcome leaders as you at the top level to provide ideas and analysis on some of the most important problems of the region. Interim President Guaidó, on behalf of the Atlantic Council, we externalize our solidarity and recognition right now. We recognize that you, the interim government, and the Venezuelan people are living in which could be the most difficult times in the history of your country. Venezuelan struggles is also our struggle and everybody that is fighting for democracy in Venezuela. And now it's even more important before the coronavirus pandemic. Interim President from the Center for Latin America and the rest of the Atlantic Council and Atlantic Global, we support any initiative that will approach any peaceful solution in Venezuela. And with this, I give the floor to Maria Elena Salinas, one of the most recognized Hispanic journalists in the United States.
Maria
Elena, you have the floor.
Muchísimas gracias. Mi
Thank you.
No prendía,
My camera was not active, but I want to thank Atlantic Council for the invitation, and I want to welcome you, Interim President. Thank you for the time for conversing with us, and certainly I want to expand our wishes that you and your family are well. First, I want to know, where are you in quarantine, Mr. President? In Caracas, in the capital city of Venezuela, along with my family and members of my team. We have video conferences to have meetings with the national parliament. They are not resting. They are not away from their activities. Venezuela reports 288 cases, positive cases of coronavirus, and 10 deaths. How actual are these figures? Well, these are not actual because of the dictatorship. There is not enough information. This information is an estimate because we had 17 physicians and journalists that were imprisoned because of communicating the situation in our country. And so far, we need to calculate other figures and prepare ourselves for more people, because this is only for the public health service. We have more than 27 million people, and we only have 300 ventilators. This shows that we have a collapse health system. So this is a national emergency, and we need to provide help for these people. What is the interim government doing to face this pandemic and provide resources for the affected people? We need to size the emergency crisis. You know, Maria Elena, Venezuela lives amidst a humanitarian crisis. We have record deaths. We have a crisis of 5 million refugees, only surpassed by Syria in the world. And the shortages that we have, it's manifested by people that need to go out and work every day. Nurses have a wage of $2 to $3 per month. These are the front responders. The health system and the health workers are the first element. We wanted to have a straight bonus to health professionals of $100 for 3 months, so they have a better means to go to their job sites. There is no gasoline in Venezuela amidst this pandemic. More than 30,000 people need to see a doctor, even when the government blocked the free line for people that wanted to access the already collapsed health system. So help was granted to only 443 people. We were trying to prevent the collapse of the health system, and the dictatorship was blocking. Even so, we were able to overcome this bottleneck. We have had some help from the United States, the European Union, so $20 million have entered Venezuela through a robust operation, and the dictatorship has not put an obstacle on this. So not only the health system is collapsed, but because the dictatorship blocks any attempt of humanitarian aid, and in this case through professional associations like the College of Nurses, they are trying to help old age people, and we have a primary attention mechanism. And right now in Venezuela, 83% of households do not have water supply available. So this turns it even harder for Venezuelans to have hygienic measures. We have provided disinfectant with alcohol, but it is not enough considering the figures in Venezuela of refugees as well. And Bolsonaro and also the president of Colombia helped 35,000 families and 200,000 refugees in Brazil. Yes, I know. I was going to ask you, the governments from Russia, China, and Taiwan have sent President Maduro's government for some materials, but your government, the interim government, which is the type of help you have received, $9 million donated by the United States and 20 million for the multilaterals. This is a huge challenge for humanitarian aid because of the blockage from the dictatorship. And we need this not only for the pandemic, because we have living in this situation for more than 3 years. 1 year when the United Nations systems recognize that we are in crisis, but everything is worsened with persecution and the crisis. Venezuela cannot survive both. It is the pandemic or the famine, because there is authoritarian dictatorship, and we are intensely fighting with multilateral agencies to receive the aid that they have brought us. It all started. But before my next question, I would like to ask the audience that are watching this conversation, if they want to ask a question, they can do it in Twitter with the hashtag AZVenezuela. You can present your questions in Twitter, and we'll have an opportunity to ask you through Twitter or Zoom, any of both platforms, with hashtag AZVenezuela. As we know, the United States proposed the creation of a transition government that will call democratic elections in order to liberate from sanctions, including Chavism, partisans, and the opposition, but not led by you or by President Maduro. President Maduro has rejected this. Do you see a viability on this proposal? Well, Maduro will not have good faith, or opposing leaders. He has had a strong hand with journalists, health professionals, and all our country is unified, is fighting to stop his continuity. Now, regarding the proposal on the National Assembly, not only that, this is not a unilateral proposal. It was also from the mediation that we conducted 6 months ago, and Maduro rejected, and that is why he's refusing humanitarian aid for Venezuela. First, we want to gain the trust of the world that we want to have a peaceful transition, as it happened in Colombia when they were fighting terrorism, regional terrorism with FARC. And now in Venezuela, we want to endorse an orderly transition, and only the United States have proposed, in order to release the sanctions, the first step is to have a trusted transition. Are you willing to set aside while a transition government called for elections, and will you be a candidate for this presidency? Well, that same question was presented 6 months ago, because we need this transition government to address the emergency. Right now, in Venezuela, we need to have a process to conduct a physical election. It is a responsibility, because we need to find alternatives and solutions. And it is again in the table to move forward towards democracy. what I can tell you is not that we need to have a unified cause. We need to win by majority, as in the parliament, because we need one advocate to face the dictatorship, and we need to provide guarantees, incentives to have a space for transition to fight the situation in Venezuela. Famine in and social unrest in several states. There were even some shots because people were fighting over food. And in Venezuela, we need to have this transition. We not only we other countries have fought is for terrorism and drug trafficking.
Reuters broadcasted that sources from both sides confirmed there are secret conversations among official representatives and your interim government. So, what are those negotiations? No, there are no negotiations or mediations whatsoever. Right now, the dictator is using our efforts in an unusual way, in the wrong way. There's only one proposal that arises from a mediation with the support of the United States. It's a reasonable proposal, but the OAS, the European Union, and different countries have presented us with the opportunity to address the emergency amidst the pandemic so we can reach to a transition. Before we talk about the national emergency government, is it possible to reach change, any type of change in Venezuela without confronting the Chavism government? We tried, and in 2019 there was Norwegian mediation, but the dictator refused. That is what's happening in Venezuela, is that this right now is an unprecedented emergency throughout the continent, and we are all concerned about the tense and stressful situation in the different states, because it's not only coronavirus, it's famine as well. There's no food, and we want to provide a solution, and we want to talk about a solution. And we also want to open up elections. We have attempted changes, but we want to reach a direct solution. You're in the process of creating a national emergency government. What will be the role of that national emergency government? What steps have you taken, and which stakeholders will be members of that government? Are you going to include other officials already in the administration? In Venezuela, we're suffering. This is a dictatorship. And in order to address and to provide solutions, we will rely on international funding, but nobody's going to lend money to a country in a dictatorship. It's like El Chapo Guzman had took over the Mexican administration, for instance. It's just the same situation in Venezuela. We have members from different sectors who are fighting for peace, and there are members of the national armed forces who also want to work with us. But what's going to be the role of that emergency government, Mr. Interim President? Number one, address this complex humanitarian emergency. And to address different topics such as energy, transportation, health. Number two, we want to rebuild the country with the necessary instruments so we can move towards a free election. And we need independent arbitration, including the branches of the state, so we can have sufficient guarantees for participation. And number three, an MOA, so we can rebuild the country, so we can gain trust, not only for investment and funding, but at the short term, we need to have free elections in Venezuela. You have the support of around 60 countries who recognize you as interim president. So in addition to that recognition, what's the role of the international community to achieve pacific democratic transition in Venezuela? Well, our best ally is the international community, and there are immigrants, Venezuelan immigrants all over the world, 700,000 in Ecuador, 1.7 million Venezuelans living in Colombia. But there's a menace inside our country as well, because Nicolas Maduro has been working with cartels. So we need to spread the word about this, because he has been linked to drug cartels and with international terrorist organizations. Maria Elena, Venezuela is united. We have remained united all the time. And when we go out to the streets, that's what we do. But we will require financial support from the international community for to address the emergency, the health emergency, and the famine emergency, as well as water and energy supply, so we can stabilize the situation in the country. Perhaps the World Food Program, like that today, placed Venezuela amongst Yemen, Congo, Sudan, and Afghanistan. Those are the 5 countries at risk of famine. So we need help. We need assistance. We will not be able to give a solution to this awful emergency with Nicolas Maduro at the front of the government. So the diplomatic efforts, as defined in the Group of Lima, has to continue to work in protection of human rights, because right now Venezuela is going through an unprecedented famine, and we need to provide quick response. And this could spread all over the continent. Like the virus in Venezuela will not just focus there. Perhaps there will be awful consequences all over the continent, and we must be responsible for this process. As a global society, we are all responsible, and we must all act together. The former and deceased President Hugo Chavez funded multilateral organizations such as UNISUR or such as Telesur. But you can just see what happened with those institutions right now. And back then, the Hugo Chavez system used to be, it started as a democratic system, but it led us to authoritarianism, and it also led us to absolute crisis. And we're talking about a country that was never at war. I apologize for interrupting, but I would like to ask a question from the audience. This one comes from Carlos Angola. There are 3 flights from Tehran, Caracas, and Paraguay, and you're planning to have 3 more flights. So how can this be happening amidst the U.S. sanctions? What's the purpose of that route, Tehran, Caracas? Well, that airline was already sanctioned because they're also exporting firearms. And it's an Iranian airline, and we assume, we don't have official information about this, but we assume that they were transporting personnel. But there are hypotheses that amidst the pandemics, as you know, Iran is one of the most contaminated countries with this virus. So having this air bridge, Tehran, Falcon State near Caracas, the dictator is responsible exactly for what's going on, and not only in terms of the pandemics, but drug trafficking and arms smuggling as well. We have only a few minutes left, and I wanted to add just one more pressing question. Based on a few reactions I've just read on Twitter from this interview, what's your message to non-supporters? What's your message to skepticals, so people who don't acknowledge you as a president? What's your message to them? Why should they believe in you? I'm working based on the Constitution, and I want to rescue democracy. Democracy is strong, and we want to also ensure that all Venezuelans can participate so we can generate employment. There's fascism and dictatorship in Venezuela, and today there's a virus as well on top of that all. Fishermen a few days ago in a small community got contaminated. So there's a huge challenge in Venezuela, and the challenge is always posed upon the most vulnerable, and there are also political prisoners in the system. So we want to respect every citizen's human rights. And, right now, that's why we want an emergency state. We want to open up the possibility for freedom, for liberty. And, Venezuela can no longer be the shelter for terrorists and drug traffickers, because Venezuela is a rich country, is a resourceful country, but today it's a victim of corruption, inefficiency, and our brothers and sisters are at this very moment protesting all over the country because they're hungry. Thank you very much. I would love to have, an extra hour to talk with you, because there's so much at stake for you, for your country, for the region, for the whole world. But it's now the turn to give the floor to Diego Area, who will end this part of the presentation. Thank you very much, Mr. Interim President. Thank you. My pleasure. Diego. Thank you so much, Maria Elena. Thank you, Mr. Interim President. It's a pleasure. It's been a pleasure to have you here today. And, we clearly understand that the situation in Venezuela is as critical as ever, and you do need global support, because right now every country is internally focused on what's going on in their own country. So this is why these type of platforms are important, because we are giving visibility to the political situation in Venezuela, and it's now more important than ever. And it's clear for us that you have an action plan to mitigate the insurmountable consequences of COVID-19 in Venezuela, because you were in a humanitarian crisis, in a health crisis, in all sorts of crises, and now you have pandemics. But in addition to short-term solutions, we now understand that you do have a vision into the future, a mid and long-term vision, because you are thinking about contemplating most sectors of the society, including democratic Chavism, in your administration, so you can provide political feasibility to the transition. Without any doubt whatsoever, justice and reparation of damages is the guarantee for the recovery of the country. But we must also acknowledge that the most potent measure today is national agreement to bring back democracy and to stop suffering among the Venezuelan population. Thank you very much. This was our second AC Front Page Leaders of the Americas event. Thank you very much.